Postseason. It's not quite postseason for everyone, but I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about postseason, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere. So today's talk is on body composition and health, but it's more in relation to a body composition program and process which we have created and are starting to pilot and push out. So this is as much for our Fuelin athletes to give us feedback on, and also to provide insight into what we're thinking for postseason over a short period of time to maximize body composition and health. So what we'll go through, we'll go why we're considering doing this and what it is, the key considerations around it, and we will have that infamous talk about fasting again, and discuss fasting and, you know, how it fits into this component, and to ensure that there is no mixed messaging, and also just to ensure that obviously we're doing a campaign around low energy availability and red S and whatnot, and we want to ensure that there is no confusion around that, and ensure that the way this program is set up is quite distinct from a traditional endurance training program, and that needs to be clearly understood by the athletes who are considering doing this. Okay, so I guess the first thing to consider is sort of this post-season check-in or checklist. So, you know, how are you feeling at the end of the season? Have you hit sort of I guess if you did have some goals, did you hit those during the season? What were the things that potentially negatively impacted your season, or things that you thought could have been better from the season that's passed? How did you go in terms of habit formation? Did you really nail down the basics of what we covered throughout the last 12 months? And for those who are new, we'll obviously going to go back over a lot of those habit formations in terms of meals, meal builders, kitchen setup, forming those habits to allow you to be at your absolute best. And then I guess, yeah, in terms of did you achieve your postseason goals, or what are you thinking about for your postseason goals, and how is that going to impact 2023? Elizabeth, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just thought I could give some examples quick. If you're looking back, did you have blood labs done last year? If so, have you had them tested again? Have you seen any progress? Did you take the steps to maybe help vitamin D levels or ferritin, iron levels, something like that? Did you get a DEXA scan? Did you have any injuries in the last season that you want to make sure and adjust? One that's, I think, often overlooked, but is very important: sleep. Can you look back on the last season and say, yep, I consistently got 7 to 9 hours of sleep, on regularly good quality sleep? Was I meal prepping? Was I hitting my target macros? Was I using the app frequently and actually logging things in, sweat tests, carbohydrate tests? And then how can I take some of these things? Oh, last year I didn't do great. I kind of ate the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day during the week. So it's the little things, but also the big things that you can look back on and say, how could I make this next year not just better in terms of performance, but maybe more efficient, more healthier, something like that. So it's not just a performance check. It's looking at all the components that would build a healthy athlete, I guess, for 2023.
Perfect. Okay. So the purpose of the postseason program of what we're proposing is, and who it's appropriate for, are athletes who are seeking to change, seeking a change in body composition, plus or minus other health parameters that they may be aware of. Okay. So overall, I guess a lot of athletes are saying, yes, I want to lose weight. Yes, I want to lose body fat. But we want to ensure that that's actually appropriate for those athletes. And this is why the inclusion and exclusion criteria of what we're about to discuss are very important in this, because unfortunately we do see, and if this links back to the campaign we're currently doing, there are athletes who seek changes in body composition, i.e. reduction in body fat or body weight, and it's unnecessary. And that results in low energy availability, the potential for red S, disordered eating, eating disorders. So it is very important to understand when a program is appropriate for improving body composition and plus or minus the health parameters. So what is the postseason program that we're putting down? It is going to be effectively at least 8 weeks. So it'd be split into 2 4-week blocks. There is the option for the third block of 4 weeks if certain goals haven't been met or if people want to continue on that. But keep in mind, that's 3 months. Now, if you started that today, that would be November, December, and January. You may already be in full-on triathlon training by January. So the 8-week sort of period to set you up could be more beneficial. It may be that you do 4 weeks and you actually hit your body composition goals within 4 weeks as well. This is laid over the top of potentially what you're doing with your existing coaching. It's just a different way of applying different macronutrient splits. So the percentages of carbohydrates, fat, and protein change a little bit. There's certainly a change in caloric prescription based on the total training volume. Okay, so this also takes into account that total training volume is going to be a lot lower than what you normally do in a regular triathlon endurance type season training. And that's really important. And that's part of the inclusion and exclusion criteria we'll discuss. It's also a change in training stimulus. So what we're also, it's not an assumption, but it would certainly be something to consider, is that it's an opportunity to do some different training in conjunction with your coach. So if you're talking about strength training, it's not going to be the super heavy lifting, okay? It's probably more going to be like your 70 to 80% 1RM, where you're doing more high volume weights training to create ideally a change in body composition. So if you're talking about muscular hypertrophy or maximal caloric expenditure, you're looking at higher volume, shorter rest periods, whole body type exercises. So squats, deadlifts, lunges, chin-ups, pull-ups, kettlebell swings, all the things that you probably don't do a whole lot of in the regular training season. Or if you do them, you're going to be doing them with a lot more volume. So it is a change in that. And you do have to expect a lot more muscle soreness, hence why there is going to be a lower training volume. Now, again, we're not the coaches here. We are relying on a couple of strength conditioning coaches to provide a program that we're happy to provide to people and recommend that. What you can also do, if you're with Purple Patch, they're putting out a strength program, which will fit perfectly with this. And same if you're with other coaches, or if you are a coach, this program can work with what you're applying to your athletes, or if you are an athlete, it will work with what your coach is supplying you. Now, there is the potential for TRF, which stands for time restricted fasting. So the program can be done with time restricted fasting if you want to opt for that. That would be a feeding period between 12 o'clock in the afternoon and 7 p.m. in the evening. And that's where you would try and get all your calories in. Covered everything, hey? I'm obviously, the honest truth with this is I always get a little bit concerned when we start talking body composition, because I think people suddenly think, oh yeah, I'm just going to eat nothing and train really hard and I'm going to lose a lot of body fat. And that goes against everything that we stand for. So there is we want to be pretty strict on this in terms of how we're sort of implementing it. Okay. So we want to run this nearly as a mini study. And I think what's really cool is we've got a very active and captive audience with all you guys at Fuelin to really make something meaningful of this for those people who either want to do the time restricted fasting phase or just do the gym, sort of a slightly, different gym body composition type feeding. So the criteria that we've got is that we would like everyone, if you haven't had a DEXA probably within the last 4 weeks, probably to get an updated DEXA scan. Now, in order for us to be comfortable with you doing this, body fat percentage, and I made it pretty low for men. And the only reason I did this was I based it off myself, and that's just being probably a bit of a dick. But I said, okay, if I'm not less than 12% body fat, or I don't think I am, if I was less than 12% body fat, would I need to do this? No. If I was sort of, 13, 14, 15% body fat, would I be interested in doing this? Yes, I would. So that's where we put that. Now you'll see with females, we put it at 20%. Now for men, you'll probably think, oh, why 20% for females? For females, you'll probably think, oh, gee, that's a lot more than men. Women will always have more body fat than men. If you are sub 20% as a female, you do not need to consider losing more body fat, in my opinion, and certainly in Elizabeth's opinion, okay? You're probably in a very good state. Just because it's 20%, you probably are thinking, oh, it's a big number. It's not a big number. The average female sits at around 26, 27% body fat. That slide hasn't been updated. Sorry. Fat mass index. I'm not sure why that hasn't updated. That should be males. I think it's less than 6. God. I think it's 6 grams per kilogram. At 6. I'll have to get the units. Sorry, it was updated. I'm not sure why it has changed. I think it's around, the number is 6 for fat mass index for males. If you're less than that, you don't need to consider doing this. For females, it's around 8. And I will just come back to you and double check that. Visceral fat, if you've got more than 80%, 80 centimeters, there's probably a good reason why you may not consider doing this, because you're actually pretty good. And then for a BMD, you've got to have more than -1 for a T-score. Okay, and that's really important. If you've got any sorts of osteopenia or low bone mineral density, I wouldn't be recommending that you go down this route. Now, again, if you don't fit all those criteria for the DEXA, it would be a point of discussion that we could have. So say you've got a high percentage of body fat, but your fat mass index isn't too bad and your visceral fat isn't too bad, but you did want to consider doing it and your bone mineral density was okay, we'd probably consider letting you do it, as long as it's, discussed. From a health perspective, Lee, do you want to touch on those?
Sure. So looking at HDL, part of this program is not just working on body composition. It could also be used to help other conditions that a high body fat percentage affects. So cholesterol, glucose, so type 2 diabetes, those kinds of things as well. So it's also if you're looking at improving certain health markers. So if your HDL is greater than 3.4, LDL, 100 milligrams per deciliter, A1C, that's your 3-month blood glucose average. You're looking at about 5.7% for that. With your daily fasted blood glucose at 89, anything above 89 is going to be troublesome and something that you might want to look at adjusting. Not, again, as Scott said, not all of these criteria have to be met, but if you want to have a discussion with us, then going through these numbers and potentially saying, is this a good option for me, is something that we want to do.
Yeah, and I think it's what would be fascinating, and certainly it's just from a personal perspective, what I'd love to see is the reason we're putting these data points in is because if you do, the 8 weeks of this body composition and see significant improvements in, say, fat mass and improvements in visceral fat, and, do we see significant changes in your lipid profile and your blood sugars? And I think that's really interesting to see. And I think what we've seen, and we'll touch on this in the studies that we can just, review, but a lot of them have been done with very low protein intake in the fasting window, which has negative implications and is what is often talked about when the negative implications of fasting for athletes. But when you dive into the studies just aren't very good. So I think it could be like a mini study within itself. It's obviously not going to be a clinical trial, but certainly very interesting for us. From a training perspective, Monday to Friday, less than 10 hours. And again, you might all look at that and go, well, I'm out. I do heaps more than that. So that's a consideration. Doing at least 2 to 3 weight sessions, somewhere between 2 and 4 cardio sessions of Z1, Z2, and potentially doing, 1 to 2 HIIT sessions of less than 30 minutes. So that's the sort of consideration. That's sort of just so you're getting an indication of what sort of training type Craig would be applying and what would be done at Purple Patch and potentially other coaches. Okay. This is where we were talking. I think I messed up the, this should have been greater than 6 and greater than 8 there. So that was the thing. So DEXA validates pretty much the reverse. Okay. So if you're less than 12% body fat and you're less than 20% female body fat, then you're not considered. For fat mass index, that should be a less than. If you're less than 6, and if you're a female and you're less than 8, then you probably don't need to consider this. If your visceral fat is less than 80, I mean, you could argue that point. Less than 80 is certainly considered healthy. The closer that number is to 0, the healthier you are. And certainly with a bone mineral density of less than 1.0, we don't want you considering doing this because there seems to be some negative implications around bone mineral density with fasting, and it's probably just because of caloric intake is lower.
And then
wellness.
Looking at wellness, if you have a history of disordered eating, this is not the program for you. Dieting in general is kind of a cutting food calories and being very specific and regimented, not a great idea. If you have a history of mental health issues surrounding food, anxiety, depression, a drastic cut in calories can affect those things. Any physical or health issues. So if you are under the care of a physician for any kind of heart related issues, any significant health problem, not a good idea. Pregnancy, breastfeeding, obviously, I don't know that we have many of those at Fuelin, but to be said, if you're, have a spouse or a partner or friend that is looking at it, not the time to be doing it. And then with training too, if you're training more than 10, and I think it's important to say, this is the post season. Ideally, you're switching, unless you have, that January race or something, or you have Indian Wells or whatever. Your training is changing, which is why this is a good opportunity to be doing this now. It's why we aren't prescribing this program in a race build or in the middle of the season. Because training volume is lowered, that means we can lower caloric intake. We can be a little bit more specific about when you're taking those calories in and not being as worried. So less than or greater than 10 hours of training, more than 3 strength training sessions, higher zone, more than 4 cardio sessions, more than a couple HIIT sessions a week. Not the best time to be looking at time restricted feeding or a body composition program.
Yeah, so Alex, your question to Alex Fuller. Who's Alex? Can I see Alex? Have you got a picture up, Alex? Where are you? Alex, are you there? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Yeah.
So that's cool. So what we're talking about here is Monday to Friday with the 10 hours. So we accept, and what we're not going to do is the time restricted fasting period won't happen on Saturday, Sunday. So it'll be a time restricted fasting on Monday to Friday. And so what we're saying in that 10 hours, if you think about that, that's 2 hours of training every day, Monday to Friday. If you're doing more than that, I don't think you need to be worrying about doing this type of sort of program. I think you've got to also remember, this is taking into account that you would be doing probably based on what the strength and conditioning coach, Craig, is programming. He's programming like upper body with what we call a finisher on a Monday. Tuesday is like lower body. Friday is a total body weights training session. As I mentioned at the start, it's going to be very different training for what you're probably normally used to as a triathlete, which if you are doing, strength training, and I hope everyone is during season, that's very short reps, 2 to 4 reps, maybe 4 to 5 sets, but very heavy weights. This is going to be a lower volume, so you will stimulate more muscle hypertrophy, but obviously you get a lot sore and you need a little bit more time to recover and so on. So that's what it's sort of based around. But you can do your training in between. So if you've got like low intensity cardio on, say, a couple of mornings a week, 2 or 3 mornings a week, and then you've got your typical training on the on the Saturday, Sunday, we'd also want, those Saturday, Sunday, if it's a brick or a bike and a run, we would hopefully be assuming that a lot of those sessions are just very easy, sort of just time in the saddle, Z1, Z2. Certainly wouldn't want you going out and smashing yourself too much, but we will take into account the calories for that as well. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, no, the Monday through Friday, that makes sense. I thought it was male and female, so gotcha. Okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's a good point.
Hey, Scott, just if you could touch upon, and this may be a separate session, but what are the parameters for when somebody may actually consider like a weight gain during the postseason? Because I know, like in specific scenarios, such as like a pro that you're working with.
Yeah, I guess, and this comes back to the inclusion criteria. I think, like, if you're, let's go back one. Yeah, so let's, if you're a female and say your fat mass index, and I've seen this in females, the healthy range, I think, is between 4 and 8, or it's actually between 4 and 9, but I brought it down a little bit. If you're below, if you're in the 3s for fat mass index, then you probably don't have enough body fat on you. Okay. And then we'd also look at what's called an LMI, which is a lean mass index. And more often than not, when the fat mass index is super, super low, we also see the lean mass index is super, super low. And we know that if you've got a very low lean mass index, that can have implications in terms of function as we get older. And we know that individuals who have very low lean mass indexes, it will correspond to difficulty and the likelihood of non-communicable type diseases and disability as we age. If you've got a very low fat mass index as a female, that will most likely transpire into hormonal disbalances, disturbances, and probably imbalance, and that could negatively be impacting, say, the bone mineral density and whatnot. So if you had low bone mineral density, super low fat mass index, and low lean mass index with a low percentage of body fat, I would certainly be encouraging you in the off season to look at gaining weight. And I know that's a difficult conversation as well. It's not like just chucking on heaps of fat. It's talking about having a structured program to literally give you the opportunity to put on some lean muscle mass, a little bit more body fat, to give you potentially, if you want to think about it, a little bit of fallback for when training really ramps up in the season, to allow you to actually start to drop down again. Because if you're already low at the start of the season, it's only going to go one way as you progress through the season. And I know Danny Treese is one of the pro athletes who actually, she's not the one I was thinking of with this, but she's being very open about her struggles with this. She's actually going on a podcast with Sarah True and Sarah Gross with Feisty Media today. I think it's today. And it'll be really good to listen to. And she's actually going to come on the talk next week, the Q&A, to really sort of outline her struggles with, disordered eating and how she's working towards it, trying to improve her bone mineral density and put on muscle mass and fat mass, which I know sounds really probably quite odd for an athlete to be doing, but it is something that, for more so than performance, it's all about health for her. And so we'll welcome her next week to, discuss that. And obviously Elizabeth has discussed and been very open this week in social media about, her history of disordered eating and going through these struggles. And I would encourage everyone to read her blog post, which is on the website at the moment, and I think it's released in the newsletter tomorrow. And Elizabeth will be on next week to talk about that as well. Does that answer your question, Jay? Sorry. Yeah.
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Fasting. So fasting is one of those very divisive subjects at the moment. And I think the way we set up this program initially was that, okay, everyone does, if you want to do the body composition program, you do time restricted fasting, because we have run this with just pure gym going athletes who have used the Fuelin program. And we had them specifically doing some time restricted fasting and some 24-hour fasts. And we saw some pretty remarkable losses in body fat and improvements in blood markers and things when we did that. But keep in mind, they're not triathletes and they're not endurance athletes. So very comfortable with fasting with the overweight, obese individuals who just are doing gym program without a lot of volume. It works really well. For you guys, I think and women, it's certainly a consideration, but I think we need to think about context with fasting. So dating back to a talk we did, and we will do another talk on fasting, I think if the goal is fat loss, breakfast may not be particularly important. There you go. However, that's if you're not exercising in the morning and not eating a really high carb meal for the first meal at lunch. Okay. So what you eat at lunch is going to have an impact on potentially fat loss, because overall caloric intake is going to matter and it's got to fit your macros. If the goal is glucose control, breakfast might be important. This is if you are exercising and if you are eating a high carb meal. So again, that first meal of the day just needs to be controlled, and we just need to think about what type of exercise you're doing first thing in the morning. It doesn't mean you can't go for a walk. It doesn't mean you can't do a really low intensity bike ride or a swim. It just means you probably shouldn't be going out and smashing, trying to do a 10K PR. If you are exercising in general, fasting might be really good, okay, to do. From caloric expenditure perspective, caloric maintenance perspective, in terms of mitochondrial function, potentially it has some advantages. If you are competing, and again, we're talking about the post-season period, then eating is definitely really important. And that is what you've seen throughout the entire Fuelin program. Eating is key. If you're looking to perform, if you're looking to compete, then eating is king. It overrides everything. So don't worry about that. Another important point to take into consideration with fasting is it is completely personal preference. Personally, I'm quite happy fasting. I can do 24-hour fast very comfortably. I can not eat until 12 o'clock in the afternoon very comfortably. I just don't exercise in the morning. That's my choice. Some people can't get past an hour or 2 hours after waking up without needing to eat something. So they're just some things to consider when we talk about fasting. And if you are going to decide on doing this time restricted fasting, some considerations for you. Hey, I'll shut up.
All right, so let's run through some of the pros of fasting. Pretty simple. It eliminates that sometimes different feeding plans can be complex. So if you can break it down and I eat, Fuelin lays out my macros, I have between 12 and 7 to do it, simple enough. It can help with chronic disease prevention, and that's working on not just those cholesterol numbers, but blood sugar numbers as well. A boost in HGH during that fasting window, studies have shown, which, as we know, HGH helps with muscle growth and repair. A capacity for increased fat oxidation, hence the reason we're working on doing this in the body composition phase of your training. Potential increase in brain function. I know if you've heard about fasting, you've heard, like the Tim Ferrisses of the world say, like, the mental clarity is incredible. So I don't know that it's the magic potion that you're all looking for, but there have been studies and some research around the fact that yes, it does help with brain function, clarity, and focus. Easier to follow and stick to in the short term. So it's, if you know that this is 8 weeks, doing the fasting can make it easier. It's just kind of a one and done. And then looking at some of the cons with fasting that a lot of people do, you'll see okay, I have this eating window, I can eat whatever I want in my feeding window, or breaking the meal that breaks the fast of the day is often larger than it would have been, or larger than what you might need. It could impact training, sleep, and recovery, which is why we put such a focus on how much training you're doing. It will be harder to meet your macros. So if you're not great right now at planning and really nailing all of your macros for the day, it's going to be even harder because you have that shorter window. You're going to have to be very specific and methodical. It may induce some muscle loss, obviously, because
I'll touch on that in a minute.
It might be harder to follow and stick to. This is the flip side, which is why there is no one magic diet or eating plan particularly for everyone. The folks that love the time restricted feeding, there are just as many that don't and wouldn't function well not eating for a certain amount of time or only having that 12 to 7 feeding window. Potentially fertility risk in females, that if you are a female whose cycle is very is affected by any kind of change in diet or sleep or training, this could throw that off. Potential danger for athletes with low blood pressure, and then any of the contraindications that we discussed earlier. Both sides.
Yeah, so there's also the pros, just autophagy, which is like the cellular renewing. If anyone's listened to David Sinclair or follows David Sinclair and has read his book of Lifespan, there is all this talk about, improvements or reduction in mTOR and improvements in cellular rejuvenation, and that a lot of those studies are done in flies and mice and monkeys as opposed to humans. So it's promising, but it's certainly not a closed book in terms of by doing fasting, is it suddenly going to make you superhuman and live to 120? I just want to throw that out there. The bit about the muscle loss, and I just referenced this study because this study seems to be getting referenced a lot. It's a study that just came out, and what it compared was time restricted eating versus daily caloric restriction. And they had exactly the same results in terms of weight lost, both groups. So what it really highlights is that as long as you're in a caloric restriction, you will lose body fat. We all know that. Like, it's nice that there's a little bit more research to support that, and sort of the people who think that calories don't count and whatnot, which I still try and get my head around. But effectively, what one of the negative implications of this study was that the group that did time restricted feeding also lost muscle mass. Now, that all sounds terrible. You then dive into the study, and what they were supplying the individuals they were either having 1,200, 1,500 or 1,800 calorie days, depending. I think women were between 1,200 and 1,500, and men were between 1,500 and 1,800, which isn't that low for starters, but they were giving them between 15 and 20% protein out of that total calories. So what that equated to, just bear with me, is that the women were taking between 60 and 80 grams of protein a day, and the men were consuming a maximum amount of 95 grams of protein a day. Now, if any of you are doing the quick calculations in your head and you're like, well, hold on, Scott gets me to eat 120 grams of protein up to 200 grams of protein. You can see the issue here is that a lot of them, those individuals, were taking on around the recommended daily allowance for protein set by the World Health Organization, and it's not appropriate for athletic performance. Okay, so one of the big things that we will be doing with the time restricted feeding or just the daily caloric restriction is that your protein intake will be at the very least 1.6 grams, but majority of you will be eating at around 2 to 2.5 grams per kilo of body weight. So a much higher protein intake, which should hopefully offset any of that potential for muscle loss. The other important factor in that study that's referenced there is that they didn't do any training. And one of the key things, especially as we get older, once you're beyond 40, for instance, is that threshold for muscle protein synthesis is harder to hit with protein, but you also need a stimulus of weight training. Hence why, in terms of what we're certainly recommending in this post-season period, is that 3 days of resistance training, short rest periods, high volume to stimulate muscle protein synthesis and to stimulate muscular hypertrophy. So they're just some of the things to consider. If anyone's got any questions on that, please throw it forward. So I think the big things about fasting, consider the whole day effect. Okay, so is fasting a miracle cure? No, it's just that you often just eat less calories in that period of time. And that's what majority of the studies have shown. The study I just referenced, total caloric restriction versus time restricted, had exactly the same effect on weight loss and fat loss. It had a negative impact on muscle loss, obviously, because of what I discussed. But it is important just to consider that whole day effect and consider what I discussed in terms of breakfast and the importance of it in relation to blood sugar control and potentially fat loss and other mechanisms. Compensatory mechanisms, what we're talking about here is that if you take in less calories, your body will naturally start to slow down. And when I mean slow down, I'm not talking necessarily metabolism. I'm saying it will literally want you to slow down. So because you're taking in less energy, you're probably going to have less energy. Therefore, you're going to sit more. Your body is very smart and it uses this compensatory mechanisms of flux. So the less energy you take in, the less energy you expend. So what is really important is if you are going to go on this daily caloric restriction, or you're going to do the time restricted fasting with the caloric restriction, is you need to consider your daily movement. And so this is where minimum of like 7,500 steps a day, ideally 10 to 12,000 steps a day. And that is your Z1 training. Go for a walk in the morning. If you are going to do the fasting program, go for a 45, 60-minute walk in the morning with your dog, with your partner. Enjoy this. Well, you're not going to enjoy the sunshine, but enjoy the cold in the Northern Hemisphere and go for a walk. But it is something to consider doing, that you need to stay active. Take the stairs at work. If you're working at home, there is that possibility that you just, you get up from bed, you have a shower, you sit at your breakfast table, you eat that, and then you go back to your desk and that's your day. And therefore you haven't actually done any physical activity outside of exercise. And it is really important to focus on that. Performance element, you are going to suck if you're on caloric restriction and you're doing fasting. It's just a given. There's no confusion with the message there. So just expect that you are doing this for a period of time to achieve a particular purpose. It's not to have your best 10K run or your best time trial on the bike. When I say focus on both sides of the equation, what I'm talking about there is calories in, calories out, comes back to point two, those compensatory mechanisms. You've got to keep the energy burning, even if you are taking in less. And then we touched on autophagy. It sounds great in principle. I'm still sort of, I'm still a little bit of jury's out on it, how applicable it is at this point in time. As I mentioned, Craig is, and he's coming on the 10th, not next Thursday, the following Thursday. He'll run through what his program is. It will be live next week, I think, anyway, for those who want to have a look at it. But Craig, I worked with for a long time. He's got a heap of experience, as it says there, 25 years in performance strength conditioning. He was former S&C head of professional rugby, and he was head of performance for the 34th and 35th America's Cup, and works in Newport. He works with some Fuelin athletes already. They all speak very highly about the improvements in strength and performance. From a cycling perspective, certainly improving leg strength, but also in terms of body composition. I know that his programs work because I've done them a few times and they're bloody hard, but they're really enjoyable. But you certainly will get your bang for your buck out of it. Any questions? Hopefully, we were planning on heaps of questions, so please have some questions. Anyone?
Come on, someone wants to know what kinds of foods break a fast, or what does, can I change my time restricted feeding window? Could it be 8 a.m. to whatever p.m.?
Does anyone fast at the moment, or is anyone considering fasting? No, no one does it. No one. Everyone's very quiet.
Which is probably good in that a lot of our athletes are following a heavy training schedule and fueling properly during their season.
Yeah. And I think like what Anik's saying there. So you've done a few fasted runs, Anik, and did you feel better, worse? How long were the runs?
How about I just unmute myself? It'd be better. Yeah, I've done a couple of fasted runs just to see what it felt like, and I didn't feel any better or any worse, but they were under 2 hours. So.
And did you eat during the session?
Nope, it was just water.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't recommend anything, or I think anything over 7, probably 80 minutes of a run, depending on the intensity. Certainly if it's getting into Z3, I certainly wouldn't recommend doing that fasted and not eating during. I think you may not feel bad at the time, but certainly from a long-term perspective, it could have negative impact on things like bone mineral markers and you know, just the female physiology. It could have some negative impacts for that duration. I think, yeah, look, if you, as we've laid out in the program anyway, like you'll see that there is the ability, if you tick that box for fasted runs, if the session is of limited duration, regardless of what the intensity is, you can do those sessions without eating. It's just that I think what got blown out of proportion by social media and media hype was that fasted training would make you superhuman. And I think we're seeing that in the research now that that's not the case. But personal preference does play a very large role in how you, you know, how you perceive fasting and fasted training. So Luke, do you want to just touch on that? Where's Luke? Oh, there. Yeah, cool.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, man. So you were doing all your sessions fasted, were you, prior to starting?
Yeah, like last year, prepping for, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, gotcha.
Last year, prepping for a 70.3, I feel like I did so many sessions fast. I did a lot of kind of like early morning runs, and I think maybe I just wasn't really sure. I wasn't sure I was going to feel on food. I did a lot of sessions that were fueled, like especially long ones. I did a lot of intra fueling for like long bike rides, but now I feel like I don't consider doing a single session without specific fueling. I feel 100 times better.
Yeah, and I think, like, honestly, like, you're not alone, Luke. Like, we get, you know, this feedback from athletes, like literally every day. They're like, oh my God, like, I can't believe that I used to do all my sessions fasted. So, and I think like, it's really important to distinguish what we're talking about here, guys, is like, we're talking about a specific period of time body composition, which is targeted towards caloric restriction in order to achieve a certain purpose. It's not talking about what Luke's talking about here of doing 70.3 training and doing it fasted, because you will feel like shit, like you will. And it's not what we're about here. Okay. So if you are going to, and we're going to be really tight on this, if you are going to consider doing this, you know, body composition program, then it is that consideration of that you probably need to talk with your coach, if you've got a coach, about, hey, I really want to focus on this over the next 8 weeks. Is it possible? Work with the coach, obviously talk to us and make sure that it fits like what is appropriate, because what we don't want is athletes, you know, suddenly doing either time restricted fasting with or daily caloric restriction with or without time restricted fasting, and going, oh my God, I feel terrible. Like, we don't want that. So that's where that inclusion criteria with the DEXA scan, with the blood test, things like that, I think is really important. I think not just for us, but I think also for you to see what works, because what it could come down to is that you go, okay, I can make significant changes to my health and to my body composition over a specific period of time that doesn't impact my training for triathlon and Ironman as we get into season. And I think that's really, like, with all the research around nutrition and performance and that, it's all context specific. And it is really, really important for everyone to just, you know, whenever you read anything online or anything like that, like, think about like, does it apply to you in this period of time and what you're trying to achieve? That's what I would say. Yeah, that's cool. Laura, you said any age restrictions. I think menopause is something like if we have females who are menopausal and potentially have some of the and if you've got any of those issues that we discussed, like low bone mineral density, low body fat, low fat mass, so on, then yeah, I would say that it's not. I don't think age necessarily as a number is an important thing. You agree with that, Lee? Like I'd be quite happy for my dad to do this. He's 78, for instance. He doesn't train very many hours, but he probably needs to, he's lost a bit off his midriff when he does stuff like this, you know.
Yeah, I would love for my 80-year-old dad to do it because he doesn't have a very, very healthy eating habits anymore. But yeah, I think age, we don't have any really young, prepubescent athletes either. No. So I think that either opposite extremes, but yeah, overall we're good.
And just on that, so this whole program actually originated with my dad. So my dad's pretty old, and so I got him taking creatine, and we started like increasing his protein intake considerably. He got DEXA scans, bloods, all that, and he actually put on lean mass and lost. I think he lost 12 centimeters around his midsection over the course of 12 weeks, and now he can do sort of 3 sets of 10 chin-ups and stuff like that, and it's pretty cool, like you know, to see someone change, especially because you hear like, oh, once you get to this age you can't do anything. It's absolute BS. Like, you know, it comes down to a lot of the training as well. I just will caveat this: the intensity of training when it comes to weights is super important. Like when we say like 8 to 12 reps, like you don't do 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Like if you can do that, you're not lifting enough weight. Like, so going close to failure, at least on set 3 or set 4, in terms of stimulating muscular hypertrophy and whatnot, is super important. So if you're not used to lifting weights, I would certainly also recommend maybe getting a trainer to work with you initially in the gym if you're going to do that. Like, it's so important. And also for form, I think, you know, if you are squatting, there are different types of squat you can do to still maximize that. If you're an absolute novice, something like a kettlebell squat, or a landmine squat, things like that are really, really good to be able to do. So things like that. Megan, is Megan still on? Yeah, you are. Can you show your face, Megan? Sorry to call you out. Where are you? Where are you? There. It's good honesty and good vulnerability to say that you're a novice. Absolutely fine. Okay. So if you've got questions afterwards, to shoot them through. Like, what, I guess the main thing, what's the main thing that went over your head?
Well, first off,
all of it.
Well, I am menopausal, so it kind of ended that discussion for me anyway. But
it doesn't mean you can't do it menopausal. Okay, it doesn't mean you can't do it menopausal. It'd just be the other factors I would want to know before you do it. Like if you've got that, have you got a DEXA scan?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, so a DEXA scan, just for everyone, is a full body X-ray that provides you with very detailed estimation of your body fat percentage, your fat mass, your muscle mass, and your bone mineral density. It's you lie down, it takes about 15 minutes. Where do you live? Do you live West Coast or where do you live?
Massachusetts. So I'm in the dark
East Coast
cold area.
Boston does have it. I used to live in Boston. You can get it at Boston General. They have one there. We used it for the entire Leafs team. So they're well versed in getting the DEXAs done. For some reason, East Coast charges about $150 to $200 for a scan. West Coast is about $50 to $80. I don't know why. So if you're heading over to California anytime soon, it's probably cheaper to get us. What's the cheapest airline over there? Southwest. Yeah, get a Southwest flight over there, visit some friends, go to LA or San Fran, say hello to some people, and then get a scan. So
I will also say, just really quickly, in the tracking that I've done, because even tracking macros is new to me.
Yeah.
Apparently I do keto and not on purpose. So that was a little revealing.
Yeah. So certainly menopausal, carbohydrates are really important. I can't underestimate that in terms of, we know, and again, like the talk next week on low energy availability and REDS that we're going to go over is that low carbohydrate availability will negatively impact, like the new research is showing this, that low carbohydrate availability can negatively impact those bone markers. So certainly consuming carbohydrates, it doesn't have to be huge amounts, but certainly some carbohydrates post-session is important, especially if we're talking weights training or high intensity training. I think it's super important. So I think the invention of nut butters has certainly resulted in people, and the love of avocados, certainly on the West Coast, has certainly had a massive impact on fat consumption in not just America, but also Australia. So and you're highlighting what is really good about tracking is that it provides insight. Whilst it can be triggering for some people and not necessarily the healthiest way of managing nutrition and diet, it can also be super useful to give you insight into what you're actually doing and why you're potentially not hitting your goals. And I think that's something, eventually you get out of the tracking. You can, I don't know if you were on the call when we discussed like how to use the Fuelin app in 3 different ways, but using that and fluctuating between being a hard tracker or just a ticker is something to consider. Kelly, what did you say, Kath? Time sheet is optional for the body comp program. Correct. Yep. So Kath, that's correct. You can either do the body comp program with time restricted feeding or without. It's just a different, you'll probably be on lower calories total, maybe than what you used to. It may not be much different, to be honest, but it would be then the training stimulus that would probably be the biggest difference for you. And that would be the discussion with your coach. Who's your coach again, Kath?
Julie Dunkel with Nick's Endurance.
Yeah.
Do you know Julie?
I don't know her, but it would be a discussion. And if you want us to connect with her, we can obviously have this chat and just outline I don't know if she does strength training, for instance, or if she programs that for her athletes, but it might be, okay, well, could the strength program fit with this? And we'd work around that. Yeah,
she does program that for me, strength sessions.
So I will just say this, and you can shoot me, Elizabeth and Jonathan, afterwards. There is a big difference between triathlon strength training a lot of the time and what I'm proposing or what Craig is going to be proposing for body composition. I can tell you now, his programs, everyone will be like, holy shit, wow, these are tough. But you'll get changes versus doing a bird dog here and there and maybe a little hip lift here and there. And I'm not being condescending, but I probably am being condescending, but I'm just saying, if you want to shift body composition, you got to work hard. And it's much shorter, as opposed to doing triathlon training where you're out there on the bike for 3 hours, 4 hours, you can achieve a lot in 45 minutes. I can't walk most of the time after 45 minutes if I'm doing sessions. So it's sort of a different way of thinking. And that's why it is a shorter period of time in the postseason, which gives you enough time to get into the preseason.
And I'm not just saying this because Craig's awesome. Doing real strength training, again, no offense to triathlete or runner strength training. They're completely different, and real strength training is significantly harder and significantly more impactful and rewarding, and I think fun. So if you're considering it, kind of on the fence, now is the time to do it. I know it changed my life for sure. And Craig's program is going to be great. So, and
it's funny, I was talking to Sarah Gross, who runs Feisty Media, and she said, oh my God, I wish I knew about weights training. She's doing CrossFit at the moment, which, again, I think what she's just doing is much higher volume, heavier weightlifting effectively. And however she achieves that, but she's like, wow, it really did have an impact on her body because she had the correct stimulus. So that's where I'd say with that. Alex Fuller. Alex, do you want to...
Hey, yeah. So I'm
Oh,
outside. So
you're in St. George, eh? Or not?
No, that's a picture of Kona. But
it's Kona.
Yeah.
I was like, been fast. Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're at your calorie goal and you're super hungry. Is that what you're saying?
No, and it's not every day, but just occasionally my wife's like, "Hey, you're in a bad mood. You probably need to eat something." So I'm just wondering, like, you know, it seems like if it was days in a row, that's probably a red flag of, hey, something's going on. So I'm just wondering, like, you know, when is it okay to be hungry, and was it like, nah, maybe we should eat more?
Yeah, so there is that question, and we do get flagged when athletes tick it a couple of days in a row just to check in, and we like, you know, we sort of look at the program and see what's happening. I think, are you hitting all your targets? Like, you're hitting your protein in particular?
Yeah, or at least getting close to it. Yeah.
Okay, so I would say if you're getting close to it but not going over it, you can certainly go over with your protein. The cool thing about protein is, even with like the studies where they've done protein overfeeding and hitting like 3 to 4 grams per kilo body weight, even with those extra calories of protein, you don't see an increase in fat mass, which is bizarre. And they still try and the physics behind it doesn't really match up. Like, it's really weird, but effectively you either just lose it to the toilet or you lose it through your head through heat. If you do go, and I'm not suggesting anyone does this, but if you ever have done it, and I've done it, you start to eat 4 or like 4.5 grams per kilo body weight of protein, you get really hot. It does, the thermic effect of protein is the highest out of all the macronutrients. And what you will get, you will literally feel hot if you overfeed on protein. Again, I'm not suggesting it's good for you. I'm not suggesting that everyone should go and do it. But if you are hungry and you want to consume something, opt for a protein source. So it doesn't have to be a shake. Certainly a shake's convenient, but opt for something like chicken, like go and buy a rotisserie chicken, to smash half a chook. Like, you know, that's what I generally go and do that. I go and get literally a rotisserie chicken and eat like a quarter of it or something. Can of tuna, beef jerky, protein shake. You could eat a couple of eggs if you want. If you're really worried about the fat, remove the yolk. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but if you're concerned about that, so on. So overfeed on the protein if you're hungry.
Good. And quick follow-up, like, shakes are so convenient. Like, how much whey protein or how many shakes is too much in a day when it's like, hey, I really should go to store and get some chicken or something?
Yeah. How heavy are you?
Since Kona, I've lost 10 pounds, which is probably because I've just been chilling, but like 175. So I don't know, 75 kilos ish.
Okay. So you're 175. So, you know, you're talking about 170 to 180 grams of protein, which again, for the lighter athletes out there are like, oh God, that would be impossible to hit. I think, look, this is where I would only probably drink one shake, but also in your shake, have at least 40 grams of protein. And I think this is what a lot of athletes do. They just follow the instructions on their product, which might be either giving them 20 grams per serve or 30 grams per serve. You can go higher than that per consumption. So I would say for all the athletes out there, even for the light athletes, aim for 40 grams in your shake. Certainly if you're over 130 pounds weight, have 40 grams of protein in your shake. Now that immediately knocks off a lot of protein. And then for you, if you were having, say, overnight oats, or yogurt in the morning, things like that, stir in a scoop or 1.5 scoops of protein into that. And that would be an easy way of just bolstering that up. So ultimately, look, one shake a day of 40 grams, I think is probably the best option. If you need to have some extra protein through like a whey protein or a plant protein, stir it into yogurt and eat the yogurt, or stir it into like your oats and all that sort of stuff and eat it that way. So still eat the whey or the plant protein with real food, because that will increase that satiation.
And is there a max amount of protein in a meal? Like like past 40, it's not worth eating it then, eat it later?
I would say somewhere between 40 and 50 grams is sort of your upper limit.
Gotcha.
I think that's the latest, isn't it? Beyond they haven't really proven, as far as I'm aware, what the actual upper limit is, but I would say it's going to be somewhere like 40 to 50 grams. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thanks.
And so on that point, actually, it's a really good point, because if you think about this, so if you're a heavy athlete and you do the time restricted fasting, you're going to have 4 meals set to you. So you'll have lunch, snack 3, snack 4, dinner. We're we're going to cap the upper limit of protein, I think, at 200 grams, which again, won't be applicable for the majority of you, but we do have some heavy athletes who are like 230, 240 pounds. The upper limit would be 200, which therefore over 4 meals, you just divide that number of protein and that would give you the amount of protein per feed. So if it's 200 grams and you've got 4 meals, you are eating 50 grams per feed. That's a lot of protein, okay, just as a heads up. A lot of you don't have to worry about that, but if you're 120 grams, you're dividing it by 4, therefore it's only 30 grams per meal. Very easy to hit.
Cool.
Can you achieve muscular hypertrophy in a caloric deficit? It's certainly harder. I think one of the main things here would be, because we're talking about body composition and it's a change, so you're talking about the relative amount of fat relative to body mass, to lean muscle mass. I don't believe you're going to have significant increases in muscular hypertrophy, but the key thing is offsetting it and not allowing it to go down, and that would be through the stimulus of weight training and also the high protein. I don't think you're going to see too many studies, and again, some of the studies that have shown increases in lean mass through caloric restriction or dieting, I don't know. I always get a little bit funny with those studies. Your thoughts, eh?
Oh, I'm agreed.
Sorry. Yeah. Let's see if I've okay. Okay. Yeah, Kathleen said like the Momentous unflavored. I used to use unflavored a lot, and then I actually I literally have 4 different flavors of whey protein that I cycle through. I use True Protein. I know Elizabeth loves Momentous. I use the strawberry, the coffee, the chocolate, and the vanilla, and I just cycle through those, which whatever floats my boat on the day or the night before. So it's a way of doing it. I like it's sort of decision paralysis removed using whey, but then it's like a little bit of opportunity to try different flavors. So it's up to you guys. I use whatever's on sale at Costco. Don't do that, Alex, because most of the stuff at Costco is shit. Look at the ingredients.
Oh no.
Alex,
Yeah.
you just killed me. Like, I can't believe I just please.
Like, look at the recommendations we've got. I 100% I would recommend, True Protein for me is the best flavor and the best quality, but obviously it's coming from Australia, so there will be some you need to order, I think $120 worth or something like that to get it. But anyway, because it gets shipped over there, I'd just order 3 bags and some creatine, you'll be fine. Guys, I just looked at the time and I'm a bit over and I've got to jump off for an athlete call. I'm sure there'll be questions after this, and we are doing a follow-up on this in 2 weeks' time with Craig, but in the next week or so, you'll read more about it and do all that sort of stuff, okay? So I'm going to jump off, Elizabeth, and leave, and Jay, and then we can go from there. So hopefully it was helpful. I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions, and it looks like there are a lot of questions, but it's really good. And the other thing is we're going to be doing is what do we say? The start of every the first Thursday of every month, apart from next week, is going to be an Ask Me Anything session moving forward. So we'll do those because I think everyone just likes the questions and gets into it. Cool. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. I'll stay on if there's any app questions. So hang tight if there's questions I can answer on regarding the app.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome, Sarah.
Alex, if you want to, I can talk some protein powders.
Man, I'm new and in such a mess. So
yeah, and I get it. They're expensive, and Scott's right. True is delicious. Momentous is delicious. Sometimes though, the budget requires if you're Ascent, ASCENT is another one. You can get it on Amazon, like a 5-pound bag, and that's pretty affordable, especially if you're going to be doing the body comp program or really going to be upping protein intake. So that's one. And then I know that Momentous with us, like we have the discount code, so you can order a bunch all at once that first time. But yeah, it does. Quality does matter in this case.
Gotcha. And